I'm really glad you're here with me for another episode of Sin Manual No Playbook. But before we begin, I want to thank you for joining me over the last two episodes where I shared the story of Saidi. Those episodes were very different from what we usually do here, and I wrote them with a lot of love because they carry a very personal meaning for me. And they were simply story I felt I needed to share. If you haven't listened to them yet and you enjoy stories, folklore, or legends, I hope you'll give them a chance. I truly hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoyed writing them. And speaking of stories, the ones we heard as children, those moments when someone sat beside us and told us a tale while our imagination filled in the rest. Today, I would like to invite you to remember something different. Today, I want to talk about those very first years of our lives. At least I'm going to share some of my stories. From the moment we began discovering the world to those first years of elementary school when everything still felt brand new. When a cardboard box could become a castle. When a quiet street could become the biggest soccer stadium in the world. When one question always led to another. And when a single ordinary day could stay with us forever. Welcome to Sin Manual No Playbook, a space where there are no perfect formulas and no step by step paths. Here, we talk about life as it is, with doubts, with mistakes, with moments of clarity, and others where we are in the middle just trying to understand what's next. This isn't a podcast to tell you what to do, it's a space to question, to feel, and maybe find your own answers, because at the end, no one gave us a manual, and still, we keep moving forward. There's something I've always found fascinating. Have you ever really looked into a baby's eyes? I don't mean simply noticing them. I mean watching the way they watch. Their eyes are wide open, as if everything around them is completely new. Well, and the truth is, for them it is. A leaf moving in the wind, a shadow on the wall, a butterfly, the sound of a dog barking, the rain falling outside. Everything captures their attention. Everything deserves another few seconds of wonder. And that made me ask myself something. When did we stop looking at the world that way? When did ordinary things stop feeling extraordinary? Because the world hasn't changed that much. The trees are still there, the moon still rises every night, sunsets still paint the sky, birds still sing every morning. The world didn't lose its beauty. Maybe we just stopped noticing it. One of the very first questions I remember asking as a child was surprisingly simple. Why was the moon following me? I'm willing to bet many of you wondered the exact same thing. You're riding in the car, looking out the window, and the moon is there. You turn a corner, and somehow it is still there. I remember trying so hard to figure it out. I never found the answer back then, but somehow that didn't matter because the magic wasn't in the answer. The magic was in the question. And looking back now, I realize it's been a very long time since I asked a question like that. Certainly not because I know all the answers, like far from it, but because somewhere along the way, many of us stopped asking. Maybe that's one of the greatest differences between children and adults. Children aren't afraid of asking questions. They ask about everything, and they ask without feeling embarrassed. If you're a parent, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You're driving, cooking dinner, trying to finish something for work, and then it starts. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs bark? Why don't fish drown? Why can you sometimes see the moon during the day? And why, and why, and why? Eventually, almost without realizing it, we say something like, that's enough questions for now. And honestly, I understand. Yeah, we're tired, we're busy. Sometimes we don't even know the answers ourselves. But over time, I realized something. Children aren't asking questions to challenge us. They're asking because that's how they build their understanding of the world. Every why opens another door. Every answer becomes another piece of the puzzle. And that made me wonder, when was the last time I asked why with the same curiosity I had as a child? Maybe the problem isn't that children ask too many questions. Maybe the real problem is that adults stopped asking enough. There was something else I absolutely loved as a kid. Jigsaw puzzles. I could spend hours putting them together, completely focused, completely happy. I even remember saying to my mom something that still makes me smile today. I used to say, I don't want to grow up. I just want to stay a kid so I can keep building puzzles forever. When we're children, growing up feels kind of exciting. But once we are adults, sometimes we would give anything to go back, even for a little while, to that kind of simple peace. Something else used to happen to me. Sometimes I would have dreams that felt so real that the moment I woke up, I would run straight to my closet. I was convinced that the toy or treasure or mysterious object I'd dreamed about had to be hiding somewhere inside. For a few beautiful moments, my imagination was still stronger than reality. There was something wonderful about living in a world where the impossible still felt possible. Children imagine first, then they discover. Adults often do the opposite. We begin by thinking of all the reasons something can't happen, and only afterward, if there's any room left, do we allow ourselves to imagine. There was an American marine biologist, writer, and conservationist named Rachel Carson, who changed the way millions of people looked at nature. And while I was preparing this episode, I found a quote. In one of her books, she wrote a beautiful idea. She said that if she could ask for one gift for every child, it would be an adult who never lost the ability to wonder alongside them. The first time I read those words, they stayed with me. Maybe children don't lose their sense of wonder. Maybe little by little, adults do. And maybe that's why this episode isn't called childhood. It is called Childlike Eyes. Because this isn't about going back in time. It's about rediscovering the way we once look at the world and perhaps realizing that the wonder was never gone. We just stopped paying attention. There are memories that stay with us forever, not because they were extraordinary, not because they changed the course of our lives, but simply because something about them found a permanent place in our hearts. One of those memories, for me, was an afternoon with my dad. I was still very young. We went out into the backyard and together we we built an entire road in the dirt. We made curves, intersections, little bridges. Then we grabbed a few toy cars and started playing. I don't remember how long we stayed there. But when you're a child, time has a different rhythm. An hour can feel like an entire afternoon. And somehow, that afternoon felt endless. As the day was coming to an end, a little canary landed nearby. I think one of its wings was injured. I don't remember clearly. We carefully picked it up, took care of it, and that little bird ended up living with our family for several years. And it's funny because my dad always made time for me, but for some reason, that particular day stayed with me forever. Sometimes the moments that shape us aren't the biggest ones, they are simply the quietest ones. Another memory that still makes me smile happened during my very first year of elementary school, during mid year vacations. And there was something I simply couldn't understand. I had vacation, but my dad didn't. To my young mind, that felt incredibly unfair because I wanted him to have vacations too. Not so we could travel somewhere, not so we could do anything extraordinary. I just wanted more time to play with him. And I talk about my dad because my mom was always in the house. She was always taking care of us. And it was hard for me to share time with my dad because he worked at night. So our schedules were kind of different. But today, of course, I understand. I understand responsibilities. I understand work. I understand that adults carry burdens children aren't yet able to see. But the little boy I was back then understood none of that. He simply wanted to spend another afternoon with his dad. Looking back, I think children measure love in a very different way than adults do. Not by expensive gifts, not by impressive experiences, but by shared moments, by presence, by time. Another picture from my childhood is still crystal clear in my mind. The street where we lived was a dead end road. Our house was the very last one, right next to the elementary school. And at the end of the street, there was a small circular turnaround. To any adult, it was just part of the neighborhood. But to us, the kids of the neighborhood, it was the greatest soccer stadium on earth. We played there for hours every afternoon, completely convinced we were playing the most important match in the world. The neighbors didn't always share our enthusiasm because every now and then the ball will land in someone's garden or slam against the garage door. The second that happened, every kid vanished instantly. 1 second the street was full of children, the next, complete silence. We all had our favorite hiding places, and we waited patiently. Everything became quiet again, and then, almost magically, everyone came back. The game continued, as if nothing had ever happened. Today it makes me laugh, and I do remember a very specific neighbor who was always mad at us. But I mean, that place was never like, a stadium, of course, but to us, it absolutely was. That's one of the greatest gifts of childhood. We didn't need extraordinary places to create extraordinary adventures. Our imagination did the rest. Christmas morning was another tradition I'll never forget. At our house, my parents never left presents under the Christmas tree. Instead, they placed them at the mattress on our beds, next to our feet. So every December 25th, I would wake up, but I wouldn't open my eyes. So I'd move my feet around trying to find my present before I even looked. And I can still remember that feeling, that excitement, that tiny moment when anything seemed possible. Sometimes I wonder, when did we stop feeling that kind of anticipation? Children don't need much to become excited. Sometimes just a wrapped gift is enough, a cardboard box, a handwritten note, or simply the feeling that something wonderful is waiting just around the corner. Let me ask you something. What's the very first memory that comes to mind when you think about your childhood? Not the biggest one, not the most important one, just the first one. Because it's fascinating how often that first memory tells us more about who we are than an entire photo album ever could. And if nothing comes to mind right now, don't worry. Memory is a curious thing. Sometimes we think we've forgotten our childhood, but maybe we haven't. Maybe it's simply been waiting for someone to ask the very first question. There's another difference, I think, between children and adults. One that we rarely stop to think about: the way we laugh. If you ever listen to a group of children playing, you will notice something. When they laugh, they really laugh. They don't worry about how loud they sound. They don't wonder if someone is watching. They don't care whether their laugh is graceful or polite. They simply laugh. And when something is truly funny, they will laugh with their whole body. Sometimes they laugh so hard that they fall to the ground. I've never seen a child apologize for laughing too loudly. Somewhere along the way, we do. We lower our voices. We cover our mouths. We hold back a laugh because we are afraid someone might think we're being childish. Isn't that strange? Growing up teaches us many valuable things: responsibility, discipline, respect. But somewhere along the way, it also teaches many of us to hold back our joy. There is something else children do with no effort: making friends. You take two children to a playground. 5 minutes later, they are already playing together. They don't ask each other what they do for a living. They don't ask where they went to school. They don't ask how much money they make. They don't ask what kind of car they drive. Usually, one child simply asks, "Do you want to play?" And somehow that's enough. Then we grow up and we begin overthinking everything. We become afraid of introducing ourselves, afraid of rejection, afraid of looking awkward, especially when we're trying to meet someone we really like, little by little, we build walls. Children build bridges. Then there were the fears. I was one of those kids who was convinced there might be a monster hiding under the bed. Maybe some of you were too. The lights went off, and suddenly every shadow looked different. Every little sound inside the house became suspicious. The imagination took over. And whenever that happened, I would call for my mom or my dad or anyone who would stay with me for a little while. Children aren't embarrassed to say, "Will you stay with me?" Then we grow up. And the monsters don't disappear. They simply change their names: uncertainty, failure, losing someone we love, not feeling good enough. Maybe we never stopped being afraid. Maybe our fears just grew up with us. So let me ask you something. What was the first thing you stopped doing when you became an adult? Was it playing? Was it asking questions? Was it laughing without worrying what other people thought? Or was it simply allowing yourself to be amazed by ordinary things? Maybe growing up never requires us to leave those parts behind. Maybe we simply placed them on a shelf and forgot they were still there. A few days ago, I imagined something. What if I could sit down for just 5 minutes with the 8-year-old version of myself? I'm not sure he would understand my job. I'm not sure he would understand meetings, deadlines, responsibilities, or everything that fills an adult's calendar. But I think after watching me for a while, he will probably ask me one very simple question. So, when do you stop working just to play? And honestly, I think that question will leave me speechless. Because so many of us spend our lives preparing for tomorrow that we forget to live today. We work harder so that someday we'll have more time. We save money so that someday we'll enjoy life. We're always thinking about the next goal, the next project, the next vacation, the next chapter. And while we're busy planning tomorrow, today quietly slips away. I think the 8-year-old version of me would remind me of something I already knew, but somehow forgot. That life still needs room for play. Even if play looks different now. Maybe today playing means taking a walk, listening to music, reading a good book, having dinner with someone you love, watching the sunset without checking your phone, or simply doing nothing at all for a little while. Because play never stopped being important. Only the way we play has changed. And I think after asking me that question, he would smile and ask another one. He would probably look at me and say, "So, do you have all the toys you wanted when you were little?" And that's when I will realize something. Today, maybe I can afford many more things than I ever could as a child, of course. But the memories I treasure the most were never about toys. They were about people. about building roads in the dirt with my dad, about rescuing a little canary, about turning a quiet neighborhood street into the greatest soccer stadium in the world, about waking up on Christmas morning, searching for presents with my feet before opening my eyes. The toys made some moments fun. The people made those moments unforgettable. So let me leave you with one more question. If the child you once were could sit across from you today, what do you think they would ask you? And perhaps, even more importantly, what would your answer be? Before we finish, I would like to invite you to do something. This isn't about me. I don't need you to send me a message. I don't need you to tell me your story. I want you to share it with someone you love. If your parents or your grandparents are still with you, give yourself the gift of sitting down with them. Ask them why they were like when they were 8 years old, what they loved to do, what dreams they had, what made them laugh, what scared them, what kind of trouble they got into. I have a feeling you will hear stories you have never heard before. If you have children, sit down with them. Tell them what you were like when you were their age. Tell them about the games you invented, the adventures you had, the silly mistakes you made. Then let them tell you their stories. And if your parents or grandparents are no longer here, or your children have already grown up, do it with a brother, a sister, a cousin, a lifelong friend, over coffee, around the dinner table, during a weekend barbecue. Just begin with one simple question. Do you remember when? Then let the conversation take over. It's amazing how one memory awakens another, then another, and another. Before you know it, you are remembering people, places, smells, songs, games, laughter, moments that had been quietly waiting for someone to bring them back to life. And almost without realizing it, hours go by, remembering, smiling, and for just a little while, seeing the world again through childlike eyes. I would like to leave you with one final thought. When I first started writing this episode or planning this episode, I thought it was going to be about my childhood. But somewhere along the way, I realized it never really was. This episode isn't about me. And it isn't even about childhood. It's about all the things children do naturally that many of us slowly stop doing. We stop paying attention. We stop asking questions. We stop imagining. We stop laughing without holding back. We stop playing. And little by little, we stop being amazed by ordinary things. Not because anyone told us to. Life simply became busier. Responsibilities grew. Schedules filled up. And that's part of becoming an adult. There's beauty in being an adult too. We build lives, we care for people, we love, we create. We accomplish dreams that once seemed impossible. This isn't about becoming children again. It couldn't be, and it shouldn't be. It's about refusing to lose the way children see the world. Because maybe the world never stopped being beautiful. The trees are still there. Rain still falls. The moon still rises every night. Sunsets still color the sky. The stars are still waiting for someone to look up. Maybe the world never changed. Maybe we did. So before I say goodbye, I would like to leave you with one final question. Not for me, for you. What did that child see that I no longer see? Because maybe growing up was never supposed to mean giving up our imagination or our sense of wonder or our ability to play. Maybe growing up simply meant learning to carry more responsibility without losing our sense of wonder. And if this episode inspires you today to notice a tree you usually walk past, to call your parents or grandparents, to share an old childhood story with a friend, or simply to smile as you remember the child you once were, then this conversation was worth having. Because maybe we don't need to become children again. Maybe we just need to see the world the way they do. So, if you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. But even more importantly, thank you for giving yourself permission to remember. I hope this episode brought back a memory you thought had been lost. And I hope that sometime this week you'll ask someone one simple question. Do you remember when? You might be surprised by where that conversation leads. So, until next time, take care of yourself and remember, everything is going to be okay.